right now. And we will post it on YouTube later so people can return to this or view it if they weren't able to get into the session. So I'm Steve Hickman. I'm the Executive Director of the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, and I'm very pleased to have you all here. I'm glad we were able to do another session like this, and excited to gather with all of you and to be with Chris and Kristin and to explore this practice of self-compassion. Just a couple of things about this. You know, this is a big group. There are 446 of us on board here right now, and that will probably rise in the next few minutes. There will be a few points where we'll be pausing and perhaps asking for your input to ask a question or make a comment. Please make sure that your microphone is muted, by the way, in the meantime. But when there are these opportunities to speak, and Chris or Kristin invite you to ask questions, feel free to just simply unmute yourself and speak up, and we'll do the best we can. We probably won't be able to get to all questions and comments, but we'll do our best. And at any point along the way, you'll see at the bottom of your screen a couple of key buttons. One is the button that says mute. Hopefully your little microphone is showing a little line through it that says that you're muted. It's nothing personal, but we don't want to hear the background of your space while we're having this gathering. And so that's the place where you would unmute yourself if you were going to ask a question at those times. And the other place is the chat button, which just opens up a window that allows you to type in something you want to say, some way you want to express yourself. As you'll see, they kind of scroll by quickly. If you have a particular concern that you want to raise or whatever, you can type it there. If you have a technical issue, you can direct it just to me, Steve Hickman, and just have that message come just to me. But it's a way for you to share, to put things out into the space. Whether or not we're able to respond to all of them, probably not, but it's a place for you to share. And we love seeing where you're all from and having you introduce yourselves in this chat in this way. So feel free to make use of that. There will be a 5-minute break about halfway through the session, so you'll know you can plan ahead for that. And with that, I think we'll turn things over to Kristin, who will start this. Kristin Neff, the co-founder of Mindful Self-Compassion.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, so I'm Kristin. I'm co-founder of the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion, and if you were to ask my son who I am, he likes to, when he introduces me to people, he says, "Hi, this is my mom. She's the self-compassion lady." So if you want to think of me as a self-compassion lady, that also works. And in fact, my son Rowan is downstairs taking online classes as we speak. So hopefully I won't get suddenly called away to help him with some technical problem, but it may happen. Just warning you in advance. I'm sure many of you are actually in the same situation with kids at home from school, and it certainly made these times interesting. Actually, I've noticed, I'm sure many of you have as well, it's been such a poignant mix of sorrow and, sorry, someone's microphone came on? Okay, great. It's been such an interesting mix of sorrow and fear and uncertainty, but also just some really beautiful moments, a lot more family time than we might normally get. I'm actually looking outside my house window right now, and there are family members walking down the street together, which you normally don't see. So it's an intense time, definitely, a lot of different emotions coming up. And so Chris and I were hoping that, you know, in this time that we're all in together, that we might be able to bring some self-compassion to bear on what we're all going through to help us get through it and maybe even find some joy in what's happening, aspects of it anyway. Chris, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thank you, Kristin. And I'm also just delighted to be on this call with everybody. I think only a small fraction of the people are actually on Zoom and will be able to interact with us. But, you know, big shout out to people all over the world who are on the YouTube live stream. Yeah, and so by way of introduction, you know, I'm Kristin's partner in all things self-compassion. And we co-developed the MSc program starting in 2010. I'm also a clinical psychologist and psychotherapist, and I live in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the United States. What you're looking at behind me is my meditation room. Funny thing about Zoom is it takes you right into your home, you know? So welcome to my home. Until very recently, my main occupation has been traveling around the world teaching mindful self-compassion, which has been an extraordinary privilege, but you know, at least for the next 3 months, and who knows how long that's not going to be happening. So we're grateful for the Zoom technology to connect. And yeah, so in the next 2 hours, Kristin and I would like to give you a brief overview of the meaning of self-compassion. And I think there are a lot of people on this call for whom this will be your first introduction. And then would also like to offer you 3 self-compassion practices that can be applied in your daily life. Particularly will orient them toward addressing the challenges of the current situation. Excuse me. So as everyone's aware, most of the world is actually affected by the coronavirus, often in different ways. I read that anywhere between 1/3 and half of the entire population of the world is right now sheltering in place. That's remarkable. This is a global retreat. Never seen that in our lifetime. And also millions of people are out of work, and many are struggling to feed their families or worried if they're going to have a job when it's over. Most of us know someone who's contracted the virus, or maybe even someone who's passed away from the virus. And for just about everyone, there is a vein of anxiety running through our lives about whether we or our loved ones are going to catch the virus. And this is also a particularly intense time for frontline healthcare providers who are risking their lives every day. Hardly a retreat for them, okay? And it's also hardly a retreat for parents who, you know, as Kristin was just saying, you know, her son Rowan is downstairs and, you know, she's a full-time mom, but she's also doing all kinds of other stuff like this, you know? So, you know, I guess retreats can be intense too, and they don't have to be sitting in place, but we're all, you know, social distancing. And I'd also like to add that, you know, for some people, especially those who have the privilege of financial security and a safe home and compatible companions, also people who are introverts, you know, self-quarantine can really feel like a blessing, a chance to slow down, appreciate a new way of life. And I think we're seeing that all around, including walking in front of Kristin's home right now, families spending a little more time together. But there is a silver lining that we're really hearing more and more about the coronavirus, and that is that we're discovering our interdependence. When we are charging forward with whatever it is that each of us individually or in a small collective have in mind, we don't actually see each other quite so much. We need to actually slow down in order to recognize our interdependence, and the virus is certainly making us aware of that, you know, because now we're learning that actually everyone is endangered if we don't take care of everyone, including the most vulnerable, the elderly, the financially disadvantaged, the sick. We have to take care of everybody, including those we cannot see. This is interdependence. And there's a short poem that's circulating around the internet, which I really like. It goes like this. This is the time of invisible hugs, of the hold on tight, despite. It's now in the world of distance that we can work at the invention of remaining together. So I think we need to do this. You know, actually, it's not an invention of remaining together as much as it is to remember that we are together and interconnected. But what we need to invent is ways to behave that correspond to our interdependence. So I believe that the coronavirus is actually a practice run for larger global problems that are on our doorstep, such as global warming. And in order to tackle global problems, each of us really needs to change our behavior on behalf of people whom we cannot see. We need to have the wisdom of interdependence. We need to actually know this on a consistent basis, but we also need compassion. Not only do we need to know that we're interdependent, but we need to care about the people we can't see. Right now, we see this all over the place. People are caring for others more, including for those they can't see. But what we need to do then, and this every one of us can do, is expand the circle of our compassion. And there's no better time to do it right now than during this global involuntary retreat of self-distancing, of social distancing during the coronavirus threat. So one point that we'd like to make in this context is that the easiest way to grow in compassion for others is actually to cultivate self-compassion. Self-compassion is not a lot of effort. Self-compassion is actually letting go of effort. It's like falling. You know, it doesn't take much effort to fall. You know, you've heard of falling in love. Well, this is falling in compassion. When our hearts are struggling or breaking, rather than going, we can go, we can, as it were, fall into compassion. And it's a safe place, a safe way to fall because we're held by compassion. And the last thing is that self-compassion is actually kind of a U-turn. It's so easy for us, at least for many of us, toward certain people to be compassionate. But with self-compassion, it's just a little turn. In other words, we have the energy of compassion in us, but it's kind of less common to give it to ourselves. So what we're just wanting to do now, and also over the next 2 hours, is really a humble enterprise. It's just including ourselves in the circle of compassion. And in this era of COVID-19, we must include ourselves. We must take good care of ourselves, especially when we're isolated. And right now, it is very clear that self-compassion is compassion for others. So before we go any further, I'd just like to offer two, you might say, ground rules for this workshop. The first is, I'd like to just say that the quintessential self-compassion question is, what do I need? And at the very basis, it means, what do I need to feel safe? And what do I need to feel comfortable? So as we move through these next 2 hours, you're going to be introduced to a number of practices. But before you do any of these practices, we would like to invite you just to ask yourself, what do I need? Do I want to do these practices? Maybe I don't feel like it. You know, maybe it's not the right time. So if that's the case, don't do it. You know, you can open or close your eyes anytime you want. You can disengage anytime you want. Just make sure that you feel safe and comfortable. Okay? And then the last rule is non-fixing. This is radical. So for those people who are on Zoom right now, yeah, please go into the top right corner of your screen and click the gallery view where you can see like 50 other faces.
Oh, wait, Chris, can I just have a pause? There's someone named Lisa with an iPhone whose mic isn't muted, and we're all hearing your background noises. Not to call you out, Lisa, but if you can mute your phone, great. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Okay, go ahead.
Great, thanks for that. So those of you who have the gallery view on, just please look at everybody's face and just take it in for a moment. Okay, and the people you're looking at right now are probably coming from 4 or 5 different continents. And we're all different, you know, no two faces, no two environments, nothing the same. And imagine for the next 2 hours that everyone that you see in front of you does not need to change, does not need to fix anything. Imagine that they are complete and beautiful, just the way they are, every single one that you're looking at. And also imagine that you too are part of that crowd, and that you too, for the next 2 hours, don't need to fix anything about you. That what we're going to do is to take our experience and ourselves just as we are, right here and right now, in this moment, and learn to hold that in a kinder and more understanding way, just like this. Okay? Just like this. All right, thanks. And now I'm going to pass it over to Kristin, and you can get back on speaker view if you'd like to see her lovely face.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so like I said, I'm the self-compassion lady, and part of the reason I've earned that name from my son anyway is because about 20 years ago, actually, you know, obviously I didn't invent the idea of self-compassion. I actually learned about self-compassion when I started learning Buddhist meditation. And from that perspective, when you give compassion to others, you always include oneself, because, you know, the self and others are interconnected, and it makes no sense to give compassion outward, but not also inward. So when I started learning about self-compassion, basically, it made such a radical difference in my life. I was going through a really tough time. I was last year of graduate school, and I had just gotten out of a divorce, and basically I was a basket case. And I started learning self-compassion, and it made a huge difference, an immediate difference in my ability to cope. And so that's really why I'm so passionate about self-compassion, is I know that in times like these, when things are really difficult, self-compassion can make a huge difference. In fact, you know, I mentioned my son Rowan, and many of you may know that, you know, Rowan is autistic. And I can really attest to get firsthand testimonial that when things are really challenging, like raising a special needs child, you know, when he would just tantrum out of control in public, I had my self-compassion practice to get me through. And I really credit it for not only helping me get through, but also helping me be a better parent. And by the way, for those of you who are interested, Rowan now is an 18-year-old young man who's like the most easy kid of the world. He's grown out of all his problem behaviors. So self-compassion helped him as well as me. But anyway, so I was, you know, one contribution I did make was having a kind of theoretical definition that I introduced into psychology, and then conducting a scale to measure self-compassion, and then conducting research on it. And now it's a huge field, over 2,500 studies actually. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through pretty much just the, for those of you who already know it, revisit the theoretical structure of self-compassion and its components, and some of my more recent thinking about the kind of more active and passive, you might say, side of self-compassion, and think about how it might apply to the situation we're all in right now. So I'm going to share my, host disabled attendee screen sharing. Steve, can you enable me? Would you mind? Let's see. Steve's probably valiantly working away.
Does that help?
It says host disabled screen sharing.
Okay, hang on one second.
Okay.
We'll get you there.
I mean, this is a great thing. I don't know about you guys, but I take great comfort by watching these national news programs, CNN, MSNBC, all these, you know, professional programs, and they're having the same technical issues we're having. So we're all in this together, a real equalizer. Oh, by the way, in case some of you noticed when I did that, I'm in front of a green screen on Zoom. So I got to do my favorite party trick, which is disappearing here. You know, one gets a little desperate when you're on Zoom all day, so you've got to find ways to entertain yourself. Okay, Steve.
Try clicking share screen.
No, I did, and it's enabled now. It was disabled, but it's enabled now. Thank you. Okay, so so according to my model, and by the way, not everyone defines self-compassion the same way, but You know, when I really started thinking about what self-compassion was, I went to writers like Jack Kornfield, Buddhist writers who'd written a lot about compassion for others, to kind of come up with my idea of what compassion entails. Because if you think about it, we aren't always in a state of compassion. Sometimes we feel compassion, let's say, for that homeless person on the street, and sometimes we don't. So I really thought about what needs to be present in order for us to be able to have a compassionate state of mind, and then apply it either to others or ourselves. And so that's where I got my 3-component model of kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. And really, I'm going to talk about mindfulness a little more. Mindfulness is at the foundation of self-compassion. You can't have self-compassion or compassion for others, for that matter, without mindfulness. So mindfulness really, as we know in general, it's the ability to pay attention to what's happening with acceptance and without resistance. And that's especially important when it comes to being able to be present with our own suffering. We don't like to suffer. No one does. And so typically we've got two typical ways we deal with suffering. Either we avoid it, we repress it, we don't think about it, we just kind of shove it out of our awareness, or we get lost in it, we get trapped in it, and we get what I like to call, we get identified with our suffering, so that we're lost in the drama and there's no perspective, kind of third-person perspective on what's happening. And so the reason mindfulness is so important for self-compassion is, first of all, if we ignore or kind of avoid our suffering, we can't have that sense of caring response arise. But then again, if we're lost in our suffering, we don't have the perspective to kind of step outside of ourselves and say, hey, you're having a really hard time. Is there anything I can do to help? So we need both aspects for self-compassion to arise. And I've found with myself personally that I've really had to intentionally practice mindfulness to deal with the situation. So I'm probably like you, I've either done one of two things. When it first happened, and I was like, scrambling and kind of really worried, and you think, what is this happening? What's happening and when's it going to end? It's very easy to get lost in the fear, lost in the drama of it, not to belittle how serious it is. It's very serious, but kind of losing perspective. So I either get consumed by the fear and the worry, and it's hard to have perspective, or I do the opposite extreme, which is, okay, well then I'll just focus on, do I have enough groceries to last me 4 weeks, or whatever the things we need to do to prepare, and kind of shove it out of our mind, because we need, I need to do my work, we need to forge ahead. So we kind of either shove it out of our mind, or when it comes to our mind, we tend to run away with it. And so it's really so important, I think, in moments like these, for us to intentionally pause and kind of check in. And I think that's partly why you all are here, intentionally pause and see if we can just be with the difficulty and the stress and the fear and the challenge of this situation in a way that's not going to overwhelm us, okay? And then, of course, self-compassion adds the layer to mindfulness of love, you might say. One way to describe what compassion is the ability to hold pain with love. And so the holding bit is the mindfulness, and the love is the kindness, right? So now with ourselves, often when the pain, especially when the pain comes from feeling we aren't good enough, or we've made a mistake or done something wrong, instead of holding ourselves with love, we hold ourselves with a lot of judgment. Most of us are much more critical and hard on ourselves than we are to others that we care about. And so what we do with self-compassion is we really learn to do what comes more naturally with those we care about, be kind, compassionate, supportive, encouraging, warm with those people we care about. We actually learn to turn that toward ourselves. And so, once again, going back to the moment we're all in, this is a moment of suffering, right? This is a moment of challenge worldwide, right? And so we actually need, from my opinion, to actively ask ourselves, what do I need right now to care for myself, right? What can I do for myself? How can I support myself? Is it a little more time? Is it a little more privacy if you're, holed up with your kids? Is it a little more connection, maybe through some other way? Is it putting my hands on my heart and just really kind of comforting myself physically? Do I need a warm bath? But really taking seriously the idea that we need to actively soothe, comfort, and reassure ourselves in this difficult time to give us the strength we need to get through. Okay, and again, that's partly what we're going to be doing today all together. And so just to mention, there's one more component to self-compassion, which is really important, and this is what differentiates self-compassion from self-pity, and that is basically other people. What's unique to compassion as opposed to, let's say, pity or sympathy is the word compassion in the Latin actually means passion, suffer, come with, to suffer with. There's an inherent connectedness in the experience of compassion. So whereas, you know, self-pity is poor me, woe is me, compassion or self-compassion is, well, life is hard for everyone. You're just including yourself in the circle of compassion as opposed to kind of separating yourself out. And normally, what happens in normal times is, let's say we get a health diagnosis or something happens in our life that's really challenging. Normally, we tend to feel as if, you know, this shouldn't be happening, right? Something has gone wrong. It's just me who's having this challenge, and everyone else in the world is living this perfectly normal, unproblematic life, and it's just me who's struggling in this way. Now this situation is very interesting because in a way it's not allowing us to fall into the normal trap of feeling all alone in what's happening, which again is very ironic because here we are all isolated, we're staying at home, we aren't interacting with other people, and yet it's one of the few events, you know, in recent history where the same kind of instance of suffering is being shared by, you know, half the globe. So it's how do I put this? It's a really interesting time to practice this experience of common humanity. So, and another interesting thing I was thinking about is that although it's easier perhaps than normal to recognize that it's not just me who's experiencing this, there's still a very pervasive sense that this should not be happening, right? This is very abnormal. Well, and it's unusual, it doesn't happen all the time, and yet, if you think about human history, things like this happen. In many ways, our generation is one of the first generations in a long time that hasn't, you know, had massive war, at least in the West. So I think one of the things that can also help when we approach this situation is if we can let go of this should not be happening, which kind of creates a sense of resistance and frustration, and more open to the fact that things like this do happen. I mean, this is part of human history. This is our time, you know, for our generation to experience this, which many previous generations have experienced. And again, not to belittle the importance of it at all, but just so that we can let go of some of that resistance to feeling like this shouldn't be happening, which actually doesn't help, especially given that it is happening. Okay. And then I want to mention one other thing. So lately, Chris and I actually, we've been co-developing these ideas that there is both a yin and a yang element of self-compassion. So, you know, Chris and I noticed that when we were teaching our self-compassion workshops, people would often kind of think of self-compassion as maybe being soft or kind of just maybe we're worried that it would make them passive. And yet there's a very active, forceful side to self-compassion. It actually makes us stronger, more motivated, for instance, to go out into the world and achieve things because we care. And so the way we've been framing this is the yin and yang of self-compassion. So we're borrowing this metaphor from, very respectfully borrowing this metaphor from Chinese philosophy, because I think it has such amazing insight into a fundamental truth, which is that all people, and from this perspective, all things, have two energetic sides of duality, and they're intermixed, which is why you've got the, the black and the white circles. So there's a yin energy to people and things, which is kind of more of a yielding, soft, more feminine, tender energy. And there's also a yang side of things, which is a more forceful, active, hard, more masculine energy. But the Chinese got it right in that all people, men and women, have both energies simultaneously. I mean, I think one of the problems is we've gendered these things in a crazy way, because all people have both energies simultaneously. And so when we think about self-compassion, there's also a yin side and a yang side, which I think are both really necessary, especially in a situation like this. So what is yin self-compassion? So yin self-compassion is the tender aspect of compassion. It's kind of like the parent who, gently cradles a crying child, soothing the child, comforting the child, reassuring the child it's not alone, and also the ability to kind of validate our pain. So one way we can think about the yin self-compassion is it feels like loving, connected presence. Right? We hold ourselves with loving, connected presence, which is kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. We start to heal, right? And then, so again, one of the really important things we do in a situation like this is to make sure that we get in touch with our difficult emotions and we give ourselves some of this tenderness. It's okay. I'm here for you, darling. I'm with you. So we can encourage feeling present in a tender way with our struggles. And again, it really helps us to hold it without being overwhelmed. There's another side of self-compassion. So if yin self-compassion is mama or parent, I like to think of yang self-compassion as mama bear. We know mama bear can be very fierce. If you get in between a mother bear and her cubs, she will rip your head off, right? There's no force on earth as powerful as like this parental sense of wanting to protect the cub, the children. And so because self-compassion is aimed at the alleviation of suffering, sometimes it takes this more fierce, active form, right? So sometimes for self-compassion, we need to protect ourselves. We need to really actively say, hey, no, that's not okay. Maybe we need to draw boundaries, right? Stand up for ourselves, say no. Very important part of caring for ourselves and alleviating our suffering. Also, providing for ourselves, right? So mama bear, she'll go miles to find food for her cubs. And that's also part of caring for ourselves. And I must say, there's a little bit of gender roles playing in here, because I think especially women, but all of us, we're so socialized to give and to give and to give. And we aren't really taught to ask ourselves, well, what do I need? It's kind of unbalanced. We give to others and we don't give enough to ourselves. And to really be healthy, we need to balance giving to others and ourselves. We need to say, what do I need to provide for myself? This could be emotionally, physically, psychologically, right, in the moment. And then another really important aspect of self-compassion is motivating change. So this is kind of the paradox of self-compassion. It's when we accept ourselves fully with yin self-compassion is exactly as we are, that we have the safety needed to go out and make the changes to try to be the best person we can be. And so if you think, these are kind of the three main forms of yang self-compassion: protecting, providing, and motivating. And again, all three of these are also in play in this situation. So more than just, kind of comforting ourselves with the pain of it and the stress of it. First of all, we very definitely need to take active steps to protect ourselves. Wearing face masks, practicing social distancing, being very vigilant, and it takes a lot of work. I'm sure you've noticed, being very vigilant about disinfecting surfaces and just really, really focusing on what do I need to do to protect myself, right? And that's from the personal level. And of course, people are also, all of these also apply to interpersonally. You think of our amazing healthcare workers who are just, or first responders who are just putting their lives literally on the line to protect others, is truly awe-inspiring. And so again, remember, providing for ourselves, really asking ourselves, like I said in the beginning, what do I need to get through this? How can I care for myself? And so, like, if you've got children at home like me, it's kind of like there's a little voice that said, oh, Kristin, you shouldn't be doing so much work. You should be spending most of your time caring for Rowan. But, I realize that that's not healthy either, because if I don't thrive in my work and I can't pay the bills, that's not good for him. So, you know, really negotiating, okay, when are we going to spend time together? When do you have to give mommy work time, etc., to really make sure I get those needs met. And then, of course, motivating ourselves, you know, to the extent we can. You know, we all have to give ourselves some slack in this time. Yeah, maybe you don't have to be as rigorous as you normally would about cleaning the house or exercising or doing the things you need to. But if you slack off too much, you're going to cause yourself suffering and make yourself unhealthy. So really also trying to keep that motivation going forward to make sure you're well and healthy. Okay, and then, so just real quickly before, I think we can hand it over to, we're gonna have questions, then we'll take a break. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the research, because this is more than just a good idea, right? So again, as I mentioned, there's over 2,500 studies now on the benefits of self-compassion, which is just amazing. And so what self-compassion does for us is really phenomenal. So first of all, especially when we hold our negative emotions in a tender way, right, the healing function of self-compassion, it tends to reduce the problems that come out of all our negative emotions, the fear and the self-hate and blame, etc. So for instance, we know that self-compassion reduces things like depression, stress, shame, anxiety, fear of failure. We actually know that it's very effective for helping people reduce thoughts of suicide. I mean, when self-hate gets bad enough, sometimes people think their best option is to actually escape this life. And so by helping people have tools of self-compassion to kind of accept themselves as they are, but also care for themselves actively, it can lead to less thoughts of suicide. This is really important for the current situation. We know that self-compassion reduces, first of all, post-traumatic stress, right? So when you're in a really traumatic situation, what we know, for instance, there was a study of combat veterans who came back from Iraq or Afghanistan, and those veterans who are more self-compassionate were much less likely to develop post-traumatic stress syndrome 9 months later. Okay, and so because what happens is as you're going through the really challenging situation, if you're actively supporting yourself, you're an ally as opposed to an enemy, right? You're really there for yourself emotionally, you're much less likely to have the aftermath of the trauma develop into PTSD. And you know, if we think about what's happening right now, certainly for people on the front lines, I mean, they're going through incredible trauma, and I'm sure some of the people watching here, maybe if you're, I don't know if you may be too busy to be watching right now actually, but certainly some of the people here are in very stressful, highly stressful situations. But even if you aren't on the front lines, I mean, just watching the news, there's an element of, the fear is so great that there's an element of trauma to it. And so the more we can actually hold this experience of trauma we're all going through collectively, with kindness, with support, with this feeling of connectedness, that feeling I got your own back, hopefully the more likely we'll able to get through the other side in a healthier manner. And then also burnout, right? There's a lot of research showing that self-compassion reduces burnout. I'm getting a time. I thought I had time, Chris. You're giving me, go ahead.
If we would like to do the self-compassion break before the break that we all take, we would need to start it now.
Okay, good. I thought I had more time. So anyway, but it also leads to good things. I'll just point out one more point: immune response, self-compassion, because it actually activates the parasympathetic nervous system, increases immune response. So there's another reason to practice it, because it actually may help our bodies physiologically fight off COVID-19 a little more powerfully. I'm not making a claim, believe me, I'm not saying that it does, but you know, it certainly can't hurt, put it that way. Okay, thank you. Thank you for your indulgence. Chris, do you want to teach the practice?
Sure thing, Kristen, and thanks. It's just always a joy to hear you unpack it, and each time it's a little nuanced, a little different. And I was especially appreciating also that when you were talking about yin and yang, how the yin side is really the radical acceptance side, and then the yang side is the change aspect, you know?
That's right.
And so when I was inviting everybody to look at everybody and say, what if I don't need to change? Nothing needs to change. Nothing needs to change for me. people probably start to think, oh my God, I'm going to be like this the rest of my life, you know.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, it's good to remember the phrase by Carl Rogers, which is that the curious paradox is the more I accept myself just as I am, the more I can change. And so you were making that point also, that, you know, the ability to go into the world is so much easier and more effective when we've also nourished ourselves. So I'm just really appreciating the way you laid that out just now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so what we'd like to do now is practice. It's actually the most popular informal practice of mindful self-compassion, which means we can do it any time during the day, you know, just for a few minutes in the middle of the day or something. And it corresponds to the three components of self-compassion, which Kristin articulated back in 2003 and also just described to us. And that is the three components of mindfulness, common humanity, and self-kindness. So this practice will take maybe 10 minutes, and then we might have a chance to get a little bit of discussion about what your direct experience was. So if it feels right to you now to do a kind of reflective exercise or a meditation, please find a comfortable position and allow your eyes to close partially or fully. Maybe even noticing how your body feels after listening to many words and focusing on a little spot on your screen. Just taking a chance to settle into your body and maybe even feel the solid floor under your feet or the solidity of the chair under your body. And now I'd like to invite you to bring to mind some way that the coronavirus situation is causing you stress. And in this case, not the worst thing, you know, that could happen to you, but say on a scale of 1 to 10, maybe a 3 or a 4, sort of mild to moderate stress level. And so it could be, you know, suddenly you have kids all day at home. Maybe you're you have to work more at the hospital with a layer of fear. You know, maybe maybe you have a loved one who you can't see, or an elderly person that you're worried about. Maybe you have symptoms and you're concerned about them. Maybe you're worried about your job. Maybe money's getting tight. So please think of some way that this virus situation has brought stress into your life. And also, once you have one, just kind of visualize it in your mind.
Staying here.
And as you do this, notice if you can feel in your body the kind of the physical manifestation of stress. Can you feel a kind of a tension or a tightness or an uneasiness anywhere in your body? And if that's so, see if you can, in this moment, just make a lot of room for it, a lot of space. In other words, naturally, we wish it weren't so, but just for now, let's let it be so.
I'm good. How are you? Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fine.
Just a reminder for everyone to please mute your microphones. Thank you.
So again, bringing your attention inside your body, and if there's any stress from the virus situation, please feeling it in your body and making a lot of room for it. And now also see if you can name an emotion that might be associated with it. Maybe you're feeling sad. Maybe you're feeling worried, anxious, or apprehensive. Maybe you're feeling some grief, wishing it were like 5 months ago. Maybe you're even a little angry. Maybe you're exhausted. Maybe you don't know what to think, you're confused. So whatever it may be that you're feeling, maybe just naming it for yourself, and also naming it for yourself in a kind and a validating way, like, oh, yeah, this is anxiety. This is fear. This is sadness. Sort of naming it for yourself as if you had a dear friend who was confiding in you, and you're noticing what's happening for them and you're naming it. And now let's expand our inner awareness a bit and just remind ourselves that whatever we're feeling now is part of the human experience. This emotion is part of being human. Perhaps reminding yourself that other people on this call feel exactly like you do, and they might even be in a similar situation. Maybe reminding yourself that in the particular situation that you're in, many people would feel exactly as you do. That this is part of the human experience. What we're going through right now, and in particular, what you are going through right now, is part of being human, part of the human experience, and you are not alone. Definitely not alone, even though it may feel like that at times. As it were, taking in the size of the cloth and recognizing that each of us are one thread in that cloth, and that we're all connected in that way. So that's the common humanity element of self-compassion. Now I'd like to invite you, if it feels right, to put your hand over a part of your body that might be holding the stress the most. You know, maybe it's in your heart region, your tummy, maybe it's on your neck. So just putting a hand there and feeling the sense of touch and the warmth. And if you like, you can even gently rub or stroke that part of your body as you might the body of a young child, you know, offering some kindness through touch. If you like, you can even imagine love pouring through your hand and your fingers into your body, into that part of your body that's holding the stress, for no reason other than you may need that right now. letting some love and compassion flow through your fingers into your body. And also now imagine that you had a dear friend who had precisely the circumstances that you are in now. Say exactly. And you just had a minute or two with your friend and you wanted to say something to your friend heart to heart, from your heart to your friend's heart. Not in an effort to change anything or fix anything, but simply a sign of words of support and encouragement, such as, I understand, such as I feel for you, I love you, I'm here for you, I trust you, I believe in you, you can do this, you can get through this. What kind of words would flow out of your heart? Words of support for your friend. And now just take a few of those words, and once again, feeling your hand over your heart or some part of your body, and begin to offer yourself those words over and over again. Giving yourself the same kindness that you were expressing toward another. Hearing those words whispered in your own ear. Okay, and before you open your eyes, just now begin to release the practice. Notice how you feel in your body. Allowing yourself to feel just as you do. Making a lot of room for whatever it is. Allowing yourself again to be in this moment just as you are. And before you open your eyes, just to recollect what we did. First, we practiced mindfulness, the first component of self-compassion, recognizing what it is that we were feeling while we were feeling it. Maybe in the body and making room for it, maybe by labeling and validating the emotion. Second was common humanity, to remember that we are not alone, particularly during this pandemic. Pandemics do happen and we are in it. This is our time, as Kristin said. To remember that we are connected. And finally, to bring kindness to ourselves just because it's not easy. Just so. All right? And then when it feels right for you to slowly open your eyes. So thank you all for doing that practice. And we have time for maybe 2 comments from people about your experience before we go on a 5-minute break. And in your comments, what we would really appreciate is if you would just share your direct experience of the practice. In other words, not other related events in your life, but what you actually felt as you were going into your body and feeling your body, as you were reflecting on common humanity, and as you were bringing kindness to yourself, either verbally or physically. So if you're willing to speak, I know it takes some courage, but I think we have a lot of courageous people on this call. Just please unmute yourself and speak right up.
Thank you, Chris and Kristin. It's Caroline here. I'd just like to say thank you. Actually, the feelings that you listed, I was feeling almost all of them. Grief and, of course, being worried about people we can't see. Regret that perhaps I should have done things, even shopping more a few months ago. So yes, there's just a huge, I think a huge range of emotions that certainly I'm feeling. Thank you.
And what was it like for you, Caroline, when you had that recognition? Wow, I'm feeling a range of emotions here. What did you experience in that, by that act of mindful awareness?
I do quite a bit of mindfulness, which is really helpful. So I felt all those feelings right in my abdomen, actually, and my chest. And then by the end of it, there was a huge physical release. And I was actually really sort of puffing out that sort of sigh at the end of it. So, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
There's a saying about labeling emotions, and that is, name it and you tame it. And even we have neurophysiological evidence that this is true, and you experience that directly. Thank you, Caroline.
Thank you.
I have something I'd like to offer.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
What's
This
your
is
name,
Laura.
please? Hi, Laura.
My name's, hi. So this might sound sort of weird, but for me, it felt foreign and forced. I felt like I was just lying to myself. The love for myself that I want to feel, it felt like I was forcing myself to do the exercise, which by the way, I appreciated very much. It's just that I don't think I've ever had self-compassion for myself. If you asked me to do this for anyone else, it would have been no problem. But for myself, I've never done that. So for me, it just felt very strange. And I don't know how to make it feel, I don't know how to mean it.
Well, let's let it feel strange for a while, by the way. Let's let it feel strange until, if and when it doesn't feel strange. So first of all, I want to thank you for just speaking up, because it's always really great when people name challenges and things, because you're just, in saying so, you're connecting with probably more than half the people on this call. Did you have the same experience when you just named the emotion? Did that feel strange, or it was only strange when you got to the self-kindness part at the end?
I felt just a sense of desire. I felt like I wanted during the entire practice to desperately feel the things you were telling me to give myself. And I just felt like I completely going through the motions, and I really desperately wanted to feel those things for myself, but I felt like, I just felt like I was doing something for the first time. And it's not even my first time dealing, you know, I'm a Buddhist, I practice mindfulness. I'm not even new to this. It's just that I'm new to doing it with myself. Like I don't know how to put compassion inward. I only know how to give it out to others. So I feel compassion for all these other participants, but not myself.
Yeah, so you use the words desperately trying, you know, to feel at everything that you said. So in my view, not only are you honest, but you're also earnest about this practice. And as a Buddhist, what do you think would happen if you tried less hard, if you just let it wash over you and see what happens? Like a little less effort to be a good student or to feel something. How do you think that would have worked?
I probably should have just observed my thoughts and accepted them for whatever they were. And if they were feeling like I was trying, then I would probably just accept, okay, I'm trying. I'm feeling like I'm trying. I'm not, you know, trying to just accept it for whatever it is in the moment, I think is what I would try to walk through in my own head had I, you know, really explored that.
Yeah, so maybe next time. So I just wanted to say that you brought up a really important point for all of us, and that is that self-compassion training is slow. And we even encourage people to go slow. We say, you know, walk slowly, go further. In fact, we even say in the beginning of the training, learn to become a slow learner. You know, how many of us in life were ever told to be slow learners? You know, we always feel like we're not learning fast enough, right? So anyhow, what's one of the things one of the things that's really unique about self-compassion practice is that it demands that we're kind of slow learners. And you had that experience.
Well, I hope I speak, well, I mean, I don't hope I speak for others, but I mean, I hope that others at least can, you know, get something from your feedback for me, because I know I appreciate it.
And from your sharing, Laura, thank you so much for that.
Maybe I'll just add one thing, because I do think it's really important. First of all, just to know that it's very, very common when we try to practice self-compassion for something else to arise, either like a numbness, I don't feel anything, or often sometimes the opposite arises. We actually call that backdraft. It's like, you know, you're like a house that's been on fire and the doors are shut. You've had to close your heart to keep out, you know, to keep all the pain in and to deal with it. And you start opening the doors of your heart with self-compassion, and the love rushes in, and like the old pain rushes out, and it can feel like an explosion. And just to say, if anyone was feeling that, it's very normal. Chris will probably talk about that a little bit more later. But you know, one of the other things, Chris and I have a lot of slogans, and one of our favorite slogans is, it comes from a teacher named Rob Nairn, which is that the goal of practice, and particularly of self-compassion practice, is just to become a compassionate mess, right? So in other words, you can even use the experience of, oh, I want to be self-compassionate and I just can't. Can you turn toward that with a kind of, oh, that's hard. It's hard. Here I am. I'm such a, you know, I'm devoted. I practice. I do all this. I just want to feel some self-compassion and I can't feel anything.
Yes.
Can you relate to that? That yes, mess, that inability with kindness? Can. Yeah, thank you. Okay.
I really can. No, that's very helpful. Thank you. I hope that helps others too. Yeah, that does help. I am a compassionate mess.
And that's a success story. That's good.
Okay.
I've been doing a practice, and what I've been doing is I'll put my hands on my heart and I'll say, I love you, Shelley. And I've been doing this for, my challenge is to do it for 30 days. And what I'm finding is, the more I do it, the more I'm able to take it in. I just wanted to throw that out there as the tool that I'm using right now to have self-compassion. And thank you for your wisdom today. I'm a retired one of you, and it's good to be with my colleagues and friends. Thank you.
Wonderful.
Chris,
yeah, well,
do you have time for one more?
No, unfortunately we don't. We need to give people a 5-minute break. So if we could do that. It's now 4 minutes after the hour, so let's meet again at 9 minutes after the hour. And we have 2 more juicy practices for you, so we're just sort of getting into it. So please enjoy your break, and we'll see you soon.
Way to work with difficult emotions. By the way, you know, if you check in with yourself, maybe you don't want to go from practice to practice to practice. If that's what you need right now, feel free to sit this one out. There'll be a recording of this, and most of these practices are also on the CMSC website, and Chris and I have them on our personal websites as well. But yeah, so what we need right now is practice. So the practice I'm going to lead now, like I say, starts with mindfulness. You always really need mindfulness as the foundation of self-compassion. And so we're going to do 2 mindfulness practices to kind of get in touch with some of the difficult emotions that are coming up for us. The first practice is just a noting practice. And as Chris mentioned, there's actually research that shows the simple act of labeling what you're feeling, especially if it's labeled like in a kind of neutral tone, it actually, first of all, we know from the research that it lowers amygdala reactivity, but just to understand how it works, it's almost like when you're in a movie theater and you're lost in a movie and someone sneezes and you remember, oh, that's right, I'm in a movie theater, then you kind of have a moment of being freed from the drama that you're watching on the screen. And noting our emotions also has the ability to do that. It reminds us, oh yeah, that's what's happening. It gives a little sliver of space so that we aren't so lost in what we're feeling. And then another very useful mindfulness practice, especially when working with difficult emotions, is finding the emotions in your body. Because all emotions both have a cognitive component, the storyline of what's happening, but also has a physical component to it. I mean, there's a reason we call them feelings, because all emotions can actually be experienced physically in the body. And so sometimes if we want to be present with an emotion, it's too hard to be present with it in our minds because the storyline is so strong, it just wants to suck us away. So if we can be present with the emotion in our bodies, it's like a hollowness in the throat, or like a stabbing in the gut, or, you know, a hole in the chest. These are difficult emotions. Pleasant ones have different manifestations. But if we can be present with the emotion in our body, it allows us to be with the emotion in a way that's less overwhelming, which also in some ways gives a more stable foundation, a more stable platform from which to give ourselves compassion, right? And then that's the next step after establishing mindfulness with what we're feeling. If we actually kind of soothe ourselves and comfort ourselves for what we're feeling, then once we feel safe, because we kind of have our own support, our own care, then we can go back to the mindfulness in terms of just fully allowing ourselves to feel what we feel. And what we know is that the less we resist our emotion, usually the less suffering we feel because of it. If we grip tightly and resist an emotion, it usually makes it worse. If we can soften around it and allow the emotion to be there, it's often not as bad. Okay. So I'm going to be leading this practice, and just once more, just a reminder, I'm not sure if Steve, you're able to mute everyone else since Chris and I are now co-hosts, but I do hear a few people in the background with your microphones on. So if you can just double check that as we go through this exercise. Okay, and again, only if you're in the right space for this, but if you are, I'd invite you to close your eyes. Just settle into your body. Maybe just take a few deep breaths to relax your body. Just letting your breathing return to normal. Just taking a moment to connect with the feeling of your feet on the floor, the weight of your body on your chair. Okay, so the invitation is to once again think of some aspect of this current situation you're in. And you know, it could be related to the coronavirus, but maybe what's happening is because you're stuck at home with maybe a challenging family member, what's really coming up is some other issue related to something not directly related to the virus. But so basically any challenging situation that's coming up for you right now. You can choose to work with that situation. Again, just a warning, we usually say to people, don't choose an overwhelmingly difficult situation, because if you're overwhelmed, you actually won't be able to learn the practice. So focusing on a difficult situation that's challenging but not overwhelming, maybe a 4 or a 5 on a scale of 1 to 10. Okay, so just really choosing wisely, thinking what feels right to work with right now. Calling the situation to mind. Could be the same one you chose before or a new one. So what's happening? Or maybe what are you afraid might happen? Were the players involved, if any others? And so as you call this situation to mind, I would invite you to start becoming curious about what emotion or emotions are arising out of this situation. Difficult emotions particularly, right? So it may be fear, or sadness, or stress, or grief, right? And maybe several emotions. So each time that you notice there's an emotion, I would invite you just to use kind of a soft mental label to note what's here. All right, so if it's grief, just, I see, that's grief. Or that's disappointment. Okay, and so again, just being curious. And see if you can also seem to notice what appears to be the strongest emotion. This may be very obvious, but if you're having a lot of emotions, maybe it's not. So just see if you can identify what appears to be the strongest emotion. Just repeat the label of that emotion. And if you really can't decide, just choose one emotion to work with right now. And then I would invite you to find the emotion in your body. Where do you actually feel that emotion? Right, so maybe you can locate it as at a place in your body. Again, maybe your throat or your chest or your stomach. Sometimes it's hard to locate it in particular. It may just be a general sense of unease or even numbness. Somehow that's how we experience an emotion. So how is the emotion showing up for you right now in your body? And see if you can just really focus your awareness on the felt sense of the emotion in your body. And so difficult emotions are often held as a type of tension in our body. So one of the ways we can be kind to ourselves with this difficult emotion is to see if we can just soften our body a little bit around the emotion. Hold it a little less tightly. Okay, so there's a few ways you can do this. It maybe you might want to imagine like you're just melting with warmth around the emotion, like a hard piece of chocolate that's melting. Or you might imagine that you're kind of perforating the boundaries of the emotion. If it's very tight, if it's like a tight ball, you can just kind of imagine that the boundaries are more permeable, softening, opening. Or you might just imagine kind of relaxing around it. And you may or may not be able to soften around it, or just we're inviting the emotion to soften. 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 And then just like that crying child, right? We want to care for ourselves in the midst of this difficulty, right? So seeing if one way we can do this is by just putting a gentle hand over wherever in your body you actually feel the emotion. You know, if you can locate it, if not, you can just put your hand over your heart or elsewhere. But let your hand really communicate care to your body. Feeling the care and the warmth streaming from your hand to your body. You know, literally holding the pain of this emotion. And then seeing if you can give yourself some words of soothing or comfort or reassurance because it hurts. Again, not to make it go away, not to pretend that you feel good. I mean, this sucks. It sucks to feel this way. Right? But what can you say that will help in this moment? Just help to hold it. Maybe something like, you know, I'm so sorry this is so hard. You know, I care about you, or I support you. I won't abandon you. Right? Kind of using the kind, compassionate part of yourself to speak to this hurting part of yourself. You know, really asking yourself, what do I need to hear right now? What would help? And then seeing if you can give yourself that message. And then, you know, held in the safety of your own care, even if you aren't feeling it, you know, your intention is set on trying to be there for yourself, trying to help yourself, to care for yourself. And so, held in the safety of your own support, see if you can just simply allow the emotion to be there, just as it is. No need to fix it or to make it go away, you know, at least in this moment. This is how it is. Can you simply allow it to be so? You know, trusting yourself that you will take the steps needed, whatever you can, to try to help the situation. But right now, can you simply allow yourself and your life and the world to be just as it is? Holding it all with great love. And then releasing the practice and kind of just checking in with your body. And again, without expectation of how you're supposed to be feeling right now, right? You may be feeling good, you may be feeling bad, you may be feeling nothing. right? It's all part of the practice. And then opening your eyes when you're ready. Okay. So we don't have much time, but maybe we could take 1 or 2 comments if anyone wants to share, especially on your direct experience of that practice, some insight or maybe struggle or observation, especially if you feel that you're sharing may be of use to other people. And if so, you could, great.
Hi, I'm Beatrice.
Hi, Beatrice.
Okay. The situation I use that has been problematic is these physical symptoms. I've developed tightness in the chest, like I can't breathe, a knot in my stomach, and it's made it very difficult for me to get comfortable. And so when you asked us to think about feelings coming up and then you offered the word grief, well, right away it was just like a gift, and you just said, oh, this is grief. And so I said, oh, this is grief. It just right away. And today is actually the anniversary of the passing of my mother when I was 4.5. So as soon as I said, oh, this is grief, the body released, it came back, the feelings came back, the uncomfortable, but for a few moments, I found me in grief, and I found me for a few moments, you know, and it's grief, and it felt more comfortable to find me and baby be there for myself. So that was a big gift.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Thank you, Kristin. And Chris, I got to tell you both, I did the online 8 weeks from Sounds True a year or 2 years ago, and I just fell in love with both of you. And I'm so grateful I got to be with you guys today. It meant so much.
Thank you, Beatrice.
And everybody, thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice.
Thank you for sharing. Okay. So although I would love to take a lot more comments, I also know that I want Chris to be able to teach a very useful practice during this time. So maybe we can move on, and then, is that okay, Chris? Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I do apologize because there's so many, I would love to hear it all, but Chris has got something good for you.
Yeah, so the thing I have is the third of the 3 core meditations of the Mindful Self-Compassion program, and it's called Giving and Receiving Compassion. And the reason why we thought it would be helpful to share during this particular presentation is because as we are sheltering in place, many of us are sheltering with family members, and it's kind of a family crucible in which we're all getting ground up together, and you know, there might be a little more stress. And then there are also people who are taking care of others outside in the work context, or yeah. So this practice is a way of giving ourselves compassion in situations in which we're caregiving. Some people have actually called this loving others without losing ourselves, or caring for others as we care for ourselves. And I'm going to lead it as a meditation, but you can practice this also anytime in daily life. You can be having a tricky conversation with a teenage child, and feelings are rising and it's hard to listen, and then you can just begin to practice this, which really is about breathing in for yourself and out for another. And it can have a profound effect, because often what gives us unnecessary stress in life is because we forget to be kind to ourselves. So this is a way of remembering, okay? So as Kristin said before, maybe you are not in the mood for a practice right now. And if that's so, all the practices we're teaching in this little seminar are available online. But if you'd like to do it with the rest of us, please again find a comfortable place, comfortable position, somewhere where you can sit for 10 or 15 minutes. Well, let's make it 10 without needing to wiggle around too much. But if you need to wiggle, go ahead and wiggle. Opening to the sensations in the body. Noticing this is how it feels to be alive right now in this body, right here. This is proof that we are alive. This is what it feels like to be a human being at times, just like this. And then bringing your attention to the movement of the breath in your body. Particularly what it feels like to breathe in, the sensation of breathing in, and the sensation of breathing out. Noticing if it feels a little different, the feeling of breathing in and the feeling of breathing out. And now bringing your awareness to the sensation of breathing in and feeling that sensation over and over again with each breath. And you may notice how breathing in subtly energizes the body. It actually activates the nervous system a little bit. And you also might be aware of how oxygen is brought to every cell in the body through this in-breath. This is a gift to breathe in, and we don't have to do it on purpose. It just happens. And as you breathe in, seeing if you can allow your in-breath to be in your imagination right here and now for you. This is a gift for you. Allowing each in-breath to be for yourself. One breath after another. Allowing yourself to be nourished by your in-breath physically. And also, if there's anything that you need right now in your life, allowing yourself to breathe that quality in over and over with each in-breath. So for example, if you need some peace, breathing in peace. If you need courage, breathing in courage. If you need love, breathing in love. If you need a smile, breathing in a smile, or warmth or compassion. So continuing to feel your breath and breathing in with each breath what you need right here and now. Allowing your body and also your heart to be nourished. One breath after another. And then shifting your awareness to your out breath. Feeling what it's like to exhale. And you probably notice there's a little relaxation. Some ease as your breath is released. So taking a while to just taking a few breaths to enjoy that release, one breath after another. Now bringing to mind somebody in your life whom you love or needs some care, or even a whole bunch of people, or just about everyone in the world, maybe half the world, maybe the whole planet, maybe all beings, doesn't matter. What I'd like you to do is to just visualize a being or multiple beings, and with each out breath, sending ease and well-being. And now once again, beginning to feel both the in-breath and the out-breath. Feel your body breathing in and your body breathing out. Perhaps noticing the gentle rhythm of your breathing. Even allowing yourself, if it feels right, to be gently rocked or caressed by this gentle rhythm of the body breathing in and the body breathing out. And allowing every in-breath to be for you and every out-breath to be for others. Just like waves, the way allowing the air to flow in and to flow out, like waves on an ocean. In for me and out for you. Allowing yourself to be part of that endless flow. Even if you wish, allowing yourself to be part of an ocean of compassion in which with every in-breath, compassion is flowing in. And with every out-breath, compassion is flowing out. Allowing yourself to be held and rocked and caressed by this rhythmic movement. In for me, out for you. Kindness and compassion in for me, kindness and compassion out for you. Just letting it be very natural. And now asking yourself, what do I need right now? What do I need now? And seeing if you can find just the right ratio, the right balance between in-breaths and out-breaths. So maybe you need 5 in-breaths, 10 in-breaths, 15 in-breaths for yourself before you breathe out for another. Or maybe your heart is breaking because you have a loved one who's struggling. And it's just a huge comfort to just breathe out for that person over and over and over again, sending love and compassion. So don't be shy right now about finding just the right balance for you. What works for you? It's not selfish to breathe in 100 times for yourself and 1 out. It's what you need. It's good for others if you can care for yourself. So asking yourself, what do I need? And finding the right balance and lingering with the in-breath or the out-breath in just the right balance for you now. As you allow yourself to be gently rocked and caressed in an ocean of compassion, flowing in and flowing out. And now, when you're ready to begin to release the practice, knowing you can return to it any time, you can practice for 20 minutes, half hour, 45 minutes on your own, however you like. But just for now, releasing the practice and just noticing what it feels like inside after having been internally rocked and caressed by your breathing. Allowing your experience to have been just as it was. Might have been pleasant, maybe unpleasant, maybe you felt not much at all. Allowing that to be so, radical acceptance of your experience. And also some tenderness for yourself, some kindness. That this is how it is right now. Allowing yourself to be in this moment just as you are. And then when it feels just right for you to slowly open your eyes again. So as Kristin likes to say, we are a curious lot. And I think others on this call are also curious. And so we would love to hear from 2 people who are willing to share their direct experience with everyone. So again, if you're willing to share, please just unmute yourself and speak right up.
I find that when I just focus on, I did this practice yesterday with my psychiatrist. And she's very into, she did into your teachings and using that as therapy in her practice. And I'm having a really difficult time giving love to myself. So I find when I did that meditation more worked for me because I was able to give it to the other person, to another person. When I'm doing it for myself, I just find I'm just exhausted. I can't be bothered it's just a life full of responsibility for other people, and I'm exhausted, and I can't, it's just too much effort to give the love to myself. Because I have another person in my life that just needs so much. So she says, I really need this practice, but I'm having a hard time. I do a lot of mindfulness, yoga, so it's just to give that love to myself. And you talked about the yin and the yang. And I'm able to give the peacefulness and the love, but it's the boundaries I find hard. To put up the boundaries with the other person that is so demanding of me.
So did you work with the balance in this practice? Focusing on in-breath or out-breath, it's just what you need. Did you do that during this
Yes,
one?
I found it was, when I took in the in-breath, it wasn't as compassionate, the in-breath, to myself as the out-breath was to the other person.
And did you find that it was easier to breathe out, to think more about, feel more of the out-breath for another? And then did you do that, or did?
Yes, I did that. I think I feel, when I think of myself, I feel selfish. This other person has a disability and needs so much love. And I know intellectually, if I care for myself, then I can give more to the other person. It just feels like I can't. I just. It's just so, I feel overwhelming sadness all the time that I can't fix this other person's happiness for them.
Well, that's just the power. You just have so much compassion for this person, and it's just a beautiful strength that you have. And what we've learned in teaching self-compassion is that when somebody has this kind of natural love and compassion for others, that what we need to do is to sneak ourselves in, just to slip ourselves under the covers a little bit and give ourselves a little. We have to trick ourselves, Actually, the mindful self-compassion training, one of the themes in it is that we trick ourselves into self-compassion. And actually, this practice, as you just discovered, does kind of do that, because we're activating our natural caring for another person, but we're breathing in for ourselves occasionally too. So we kind of sneak ourselves in, And so I think you had a preliminary experience of that, but I just want to honor also your awareness of how difficult it is to be kind to ourselves, particularly when we're caring for somebody else. And that you also had the courage to share that. And so that's where you are right now. That's where a lot of people on this call are right now. And let's just allow that to be so, and just be tender with ourselves, because this is so, and it is how it is in the beginning of self-compassion practice. And it could take weeks, months, years, it doesn't matter. Every time you're able to give yourself a little kindness, it's a victory. and you can give yourself kind of a pat on the back, a smile, and carry on, you know.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Chris. Thank you, Kristin.
Thanks. We might have time for one more, do we, Kristin and Steve? One more sharing? No? Why don't we take one more?
Yeah, just maybe briefly.
Brief
one tiny little more practice, and then. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
I have a really brief. Oh, there's two of us. Go ahead.
Well, I could relate to what was being said earlier, and in this practice, sometimes I find it difficult to breathe in for myself, and what I find myself sometimes doing is more along the lines of the Tonglen practice. And so I kind of breathe in for the suffering of the world, or maybe a particular person, or myself included, and then on the out breath, sending out ease or some kind of feeling of light or comfort, compassion, and that could go out to, you know, that particular person or the world, and myself included. And somehow when I do it that way, I just, you know, the sneak in aspect somehow gets in there. And yeah, so it's a little bit of a circle for me. Like other times I actually can really take in the compassion for myself, like breathing in if I have a sense of lightness or something, but that's often difficult. And so I find it helpful to do it the other way around sometimes.
Yeah, so thank you for mentioning Tonglen. And this practice actually derived from Tonglen. Some people find it difficult to breathe in the struggles of others because they feel like, oh, I have enough. So we've adapted this practice in the way we've just done it. But for those people who are interested in Tonglen practice, we would strongly encourage you to take the compassion cultivation training program, because Tonglen is a core meditation practice within that training. So that's an option for those who would like to follow the suggestion of the person who just spoke. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name because I actually couldn't see you for some reason. You didn't come up on the images, but I do want to thank you for your sharing.
Thank you. It's Dina.
Hi, Dina. Thank you. All right, so Kristin and Steve.
Okay, this will just take just a couple minutes. One of the things we know from the research is a whole field of positive psychology is that although, you know, it's important that we pay attention to our negative emotions and that we try to deal with them in a really healthy way, it's also really important that we focus on our positive emotions, because we have a negativity bias. We tend to be naturally drawn to the negative, and we kind of overlook the positive. And so one of the things that's really come out of the research is the power of gratitude, right? So what is gratitude? It's being actually, you know, expressing, first of all, being mindful of what's good instead of overlooking it, and actually taking a moment to express appreciation for what's right, when usually we're preoccupied with what's wrong. And so in a situation like this, you know, when we're all sheltering at home, many people I know have talked about the things that they are grateful for, that they're aware of now, that they may not even have taken account of earlier, like, you know, the grocery store person who sells you the groceries, or the people that make the food, or, you know, all the people that are so essential for us to be able to live our lives. And then once something like this happens and we realize, wow, maybe we can't take them for granted anymore, having gratitude for all the pieces that make our world function can actually be a really a good way to bring some positivity in our life. And again, it's not like fake positivity, like everything's great, because it's not. But yet it is true that there's a lot of wonderful things about our world that we often overlook. So what I would invite everyone to do is, in your little chat bar, write something that you are grateful for, that maybe you've become grateful for as a result of the situation we're all going through together, that maybe earlier you didn't notice or maybe even took for granted. Let's just see what comes up. So just write it in your chat bar to everyone. Okay, indoor plumbing, ergonomic desk setup. Right, friends, Sangha, freedom to travel, gas station attendants, kittens. Boy, they're coming fast and furious time. Yes, amazing play, my body, kind neighbors, working from home, the gift of breathing, coziness, stores, home yoga, sunlight, music, solitariness. Wow, there's a lot. Yeah. So, yeah, so just spending a little time each day, actually, and you have to do it as an intentional practice, because our mind doesn't naturally tend to go there. Our mind's usually in survival mode and trying to look for problems to stay safe. So there's research showing that, just like, for instance, before you go to bed, focusing on 10 good things that happened that day that you're grateful for can greatly increase happiness and reduce depression in the long run. So that's just one more practice you can engage in during this time. Okay, and then Steve, would you like to close us out? Our executive director, who's an amazing executive director, Steve Hickman.
Thanks, Kristin and Chris, and for everyone here and your contributions. You will all receive an email in the next 24 hours or so that will include a link to the recording of this session, so you can go back and linger and revisit anything that touched you. And many of you have reached out and supported the Center for Mindful Self-Compassion over the past several weeks, and we deeply appreciate your generosity. And we'll continue to invite you to support us in various ways as we move through these difficult waters of this virus situation that we all face together. So it's been a great pleasure to be with all of you, and we wish you well. And please stay in touch with us at the Center for MSC. You can unmute yourself now if you'd like to say goodbye in your language, in your own particular way. Let us all hear your voices.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen and Chris.
Thanks,
everyone.
Thank you.
Stay safe.
Much gratitude.
Thank you.
So much.
Wow.
Thank you.
Ready not to
Very well.
Yeah.